Good morning, everyone. So today I will mention about GMRT, Giant Meter Radio Telescope, operated by NCRA TIFR. It is situated right close to Pune. If you are in Pune, you could have visited. Every year, Radio Astronomy Winter School, we arrange a visit to GMRT for a few days. But I think someday in future you will be able to visit this place. So along with the title, I mentioned that it's a technological and scientific milestone in Indian science. That's a truly milestone because it's a major telescope, not only in India, but if you take the whole world in context. So when you have time, you can browse through some of the news. The recent news was a IEEE milestone for GMRT. That was a big news about a month ago. There are only three IEEE milestone awarded within Indian science. One was J.C. Bose experiment, C.V. Raman's Nobel Prize, and third one is GMRT. And then there are some other videos about general videos about GMRT. One is by American Physical Society, which was done about a year back. That's about 6 to 8 minutes long video. It gives a good overview of GMRT in a global context. Then there are some videos by Vijnan Prasar about half an hour duration. It gives you a general overview of GMRT. And there are many other videos by several agencies on GMRT. So when you have time, you can go through all of them for general awareness about GMRT. So I'll get back to the main talk. So in here, I will quickly mention about a very short introduction to astronomy. I think most of you know by now, so I don't need to do much introduction to astronomy. And introduce GMRT, the world's largest radio telescope operating at meter wavelength. And then I will mention upgraded GMRT, and then a few key science areas using GMRT. The science results, I think mostly individual speakers will cover. Somebody working on H1, they will mention about H1 science. Somebody working on transients, they will mention about transient science. I think clusters, Ruta might have showed some UGMRT images. So I will not mention individual science, but I will generally mention the topics. Then lastly, I think this kind of audience, it is better to have one slide on how to join NCRA and other institutes like IUCA or TIFR or IIA, any other institutes. So for my completeness, I will mention a few commonly used units. One AU is sun earth distance. One light second is this much, 3 lakh kilometers, and light year is we use distance in light years. And parsec. Parsec is 3.26 light years. That's actually one AU seen as 1 arcsecond as a parallax. Then comes to kiloparsec, megaparsec, and gigaparsec. And at some large distances, we measure the distance as redshift. And that I think somewhere you would have studied. And mass in units of solar mass. So this is generally, I think you should know generally when you are dealing with astronomy. And a couple of general sites, this Milky Way is our galaxy, which contains stars, dust, gas, and other dark matters. And galaxies come with various kind of science. So I will just a multi-wavelength science. So this is to build you up saying that why radio astronomy. So as you can see in Milky Way, you see different pictures in different wavelength, and same is Andromeda. So you see different information in different parts of electromagnetic spectrum. So the reason I showed you last 2-3 slides is that astronomy consists of study of objects in the sky at various wavelengths: optical, infrared, ultraviolet, radio, X-ray, and IR, all these wavelengths. So that is the reason I just showed you a couple of pictures saying that you get different pictures in different part of the electromagnetic spectrum. And then by combining all together, you will form a complete picture of the galaxy. Why does the galaxy is bright in X-ray and not bright in optical, or other way around also? Why does the galaxy so bright in radio but very faint in optical? Or why does the galaxy is very bright in optical and not seen at all in radio wavelength? So these are the information which are needed to understand the object in a complete manner. So now I will come back to, so this much introduction to convince you saying that we need telescopes at different part of the electromagnetic spectrum: infrared, optical, IR, X-ray, and radio. So here I will come to GMRT. So GMRT consists of 30 antennas, each of 45 meter diameter. It's spread over about 25 kilometer area, in Khodar, which is about 90 kilometers off Pune city. It is among the world's largest radio telescope at meter waves. So recently, the LOFAR in Netherlands and SK is coming up. So uh, GMRT will be among the world's largest when these telescopes comes up. So some special thing about GMRT is that it uses a very special concept called SMART, stretched mesh attached to rope trusses. So that is to have a very clever design to optimize the cost as well as the size versus cost optimization. And it operates from 150 megahertz to 1450 megahertz. It is supposed to operate below 100 megahertz, but that is not yet implemented. But right now it is operating between about 130 megahertz to 1450 megahertz. And this telescope is completely designed and fabricated in India. Whereas you can see some other instruments which are imported and imported as a ready-made piece. But GMRT is completely designed, fabricated in India. So that's something about special and we should be proud of. So single antenna, here is a picture of single antenna. So the diameter is 45 meter. It is 7% solidity with some stainless steel wire meshes. 7% solidity means 93% transparent. So this helps to withstand the wind. So when there is a high wind, a solid surface gives much more pressure compared to the wire mesh. Wire mesh actually allows the wind to pass through, so it can withstand higher wind. So here is another picture. It's called see-through antenna because it's a completely wire mesh with 93% transparent. So this helps to operate the telescope at reasonably high wind speed because wind just passes through, and that's because when your dish is so large, you have to take care of the wind loading and other parameters. Even when there is a high wind, even if you're holding umbrella, you can't even hold the umbrella properly in a high wind. So you just imagine a 45-meter dish. So few nice photographs. So this one is taken around the GMRT Center Square. This is some 2-3 more photographs to show you. And you will find many more photographs in Google somewhere, GMRT photographs, because many people visit GMRT and they take nice photographs and post it on the internet. So this is one of the nice photographs about, there was some water lake kind of thing, and this is nice reflection. Okay, so now I will come to the location. So location and arrangement. So location is about 90 kilometers from Pune. So in the center you can see about 12 dishes in a very compact arrangement. So within about a kilometer size, we have arranged 12 dishes, and remaining 18 dishes are covered in Y shape, spreading up to about a 25-kilometer area. That you will come to know why. I will shortly explain why this 12 in a compact area. That is to get sensitive measurement about extended structure. So I will probably explain in the coming slides. So now why this kind of Y array? Why not build a single antenna? So you might have heard about this Arecibo dish news about a month back, and you might have heard about the FAST telescope in China. This is a single dish telescope. The FAST is a single dish telescope in China, which is the diameter of 500 or more than half a kilometer. So why we need small dishes on many number? So the answer is in the requirement of angular resolution. So generally the order of magnitude formula for resolution is lambda by d. So at 1 meter wavelength, even a 100-meter radio telescope is much worse than a small optical telescope. So because the wavelength is very large, so whereas in optical wavelength, the optical telescope wavelength is in nanometer, here we are talking about meters. So if you have even the big dish like 100-meter or of that size, which is probably the biggest steerable dish which you can make, that you don't have enough resolution in the sky to image the sky in high resolution. But if you want 1 nanosecond resolution, if you want the spatial resolution to separate two objects in the sky to the level of 1 nanosecond, then you need a radio telescope of like 100-kilometer size. But that much you can't build a single dish. So what was done was to synthesize the aperture of single antennas to form a large dish. That is called an interferometer and aperture synthesis. Means you combine the signal from two antennas and effectively get the resolution of the separation of the antenna. So this is the solution, and this solution got the Nobel Prize for this kind of clever design. So basically, the basis of the design is like similar to the Young's double slit experiment. That when you have two slits and wavefront passes through that, and you form fringe. So this is similar to this. That when there are two telescopes, you combine the signal in that way, you get fringes. So basically, there is some similarity between these two. Young's double slit, all of you might have studied or you will study in your degrees. So there's a similarity between these two. Provided you do all this delay correction for extra path length, etc., because that is possible. You know exactly which direction the telescope looking at, and these are all doable in the computer. That if you know exactly what is the path length of the waveform from different antennas, you can compensate to so that they are in a near simultaneous manner. So you can see in this picture below that if you can combine the two telescope signals in appropriate delay corrected manner, then you can get fringes. Means you get information from the same wavefront and you can follow fringes. And this fringe rate, how narrow or broad the fringe depends on how far or close the antennas. So you can see now that the finest fringe depends on the largest antenna separation. So as if you arrange the telescopes in Y-shaped array, as Earth rotates, it actually fills. You can see the right side picture that in the light green area, the yellow dots are filled. That is not because the telescope is moved, it is because Earth has rotated. So because of Earth's rotation, effectively every 1 hour you are getting a new location for a telescope, right? So therefore, as if you are every integration you get a new location of the telescope. So as if you have put that many telescopes in place. So like thousands of or hundreds of telescopes over the time. So that aperture fills up. So this effectively means you have a telescope. You have a telescope of the size of that green circle. So since it is a separation between the two telescopes, now separation has no constraints, not as much constraint as a single dish. See here. So this is the way it is, right? So your resolution depends on the largest separation. So that is your best resolution you will get. Because it's a separation, the separation can be much more than the single dish size. You can have a 10-meter dish and separated by 1,000 kilometers and connected by optical fiber or other signal transport mechanisms by appropriately delay corrected. So once you have that kind of mechanisms, then that you can have two telescopes, but you can combine them. Separation can be thousands of kilometers. You might have heard VLBI, very long baseline interferometry, or recently you might have heard Event Horizon Telescope, which has actually measured the size of the event horizon. So they are all made using this kind of concept that you have single antenna, single dishes kept in different countries or different places, combine their signal in a phase corrected appropriate manner, then you get a resolution which is equivalent of that. Now you can ask this question that what stops the distance. So one is that you should be able to see the source simultaneously. So as long as you can see the source simultaneously in two telescopes, you can keep one telescope in Earth and one telescope in Moon also. So even that is possible. You might have heard about a Japanese experiment called HALCA, HALCA. There they kept one antenna in the Earth and one antenna in the geostationary orbit, which is like 36,000 kilometers or something. So now you can imagine the resolution, lambda by d, where d becomes 36,000 kilometers, not like 30 meter or 40 meter. So it becomes like micro-arcsecond or milli-arcsecond resolution. So with these techniques of aperture synthesis, the radio telescope offers the highest resolution among any other branches of astronomy. Like optical telescope can be like sub-arcsecond in the normal, even if it is like a 30-meter dish, it can be sub-arcsecond. But this radio telescope can give milli-arcsecond or micro-arcsecond. So back to the GMRT. So there are other telescopes I will show you for comparison. Some very famous interferometry telescopes are like VLA in USA, which has been built in 1970s. They have 27 telescopes of 25-meter diameter. The largest separation is 33 kilometers. And Westerbork, they have Netherlands, they have 25-meter dishes, 14 number. They are a bit compact actually, only 3 kilometer size. Similarly, in Australia, they have a few dishes which is about 6 kilometer size. But GMRT, you can see 45-meter dishes and 30 numbers spread over about 25-kilometer area. This operates in a different frequency range compared to all other telescopes. It is a very good big telescope as well as complementary to other telescopes. So current observing bands of GMRT, before I go to upgraded GMRT, is at 150 megahertz, 233 megahertz, 327 megahertz, and 610 megahertz and L band. So you can observe at spot frequencies of this wavelength. Initially, these frequency bands were selected as bit narrow because of radio frequency interference. There are too much of signal comes, too much of artificial signal comes. So to avoid too much of noise, people selected narrow band. Also, the technology of 1990s did not allow like a huge bandwidth. Whereas in the last 5 years or 5-6 years, GMRT has been working, and then there were thoughts about upgraded GMRT. So just like you upgrade your skills or your any other device, as time goes up, as time goes on, you should also upgrade any other instruments. So the same way GMRT, which was there since 1990s, by 2015 or so, it started the process of upgrade to keep up with the time. Because globally there were efforts going on, SK and many other big telescopes coming, and also technology has developed. Right between 1990 and 2015, 25 years, the electronics and receiver technologies have substantially improved. So since we have a new technology, so everything is in falls in place for a upgraded GMRT. So in L band, the frequency coverage is from 1000 megahertz to 1450 megahertz. It's actually existing wideband feed has been improved, but major upgrade happened in the band 4, 3, and 2. Band 4 is like earlier 610 megahertz has now become 550 to 850 megahertz speed, and earlier 325 megahertz speed has become now 250 to 500 megahertz wideband feed. You just remember, imagine that in 250 to 500 megahertz, the bandwidth is 250 megahertz. The central RF is about 400 megahertz. So delta nu is comparable to the nu. So it's really wideband. Delta nu by nu is like more than half or something. So it's truly wideband. This actually introduces some problems in the later part, which I will explain, because of the so much wideband. It's a challenge to analyze wideband data. And in band 2, it is like 120 to 250 megahertz. That's here also, like if you take 150 or 170 megahertz as central band, the delta nu is also comparable to the nu. So it's a really wide band from that point of view. And band 1 is like 30 to 80 megahertz. It's on hold at present because of all technical reasons. Earlier we had our correlator bandwidth was 32 megahertz, whereas now it is 400 megahertz. We can go up to 32,000 channels, half a second integration, and all full polarization. And along with this receiver upgrade, which is a major part of GMRT upgrade, many other upgrades also happened, like antenna, motors, and mechanical structure, electrical structure, then control monitor system, servo FPS. Many things are upgraded in parallel. So except the dish, actually everything is become new in GMRT. Just to show you a few examples of some of you are maybe interested. This is the L band feed from about 980 to 1520 megahertz. So this bandwidth is, these are not like a very sharp drop. So this band drops slowly. So in case you have a signal at 5, 15, 20, you can still, with the longer integration, you may still be able to detect it. So 610 megahertz band, the blue one is the old and this green one is the new one. You can actually see that the new band is substantially wide and better also in terms of gain. And band 3, so band 3, the green one is the measured wide band. So 250 to 500 megahertz, it works fine. Now the best comparison is in terms of the fractional bandwidth. So in this plot, I am showing you the fractional bandwidth improvement with after the upgrade. And after the upgrade, the GMRT has been declared as a square kilometer for a pathfinder. So I will mention about SK a bit later, but just now you just keep this in mind that GMRT is a pathfinder for SKA. SKA is the future big telescope, and pathfinder means it is like a mini version of that. So in the purple or magenta color, I have shown you the band 2, 70% is the fractional bandwidth, and band 3 is also comparable, 70% is the fractional bandwidth. The earlier fractional bandwidth is just 10%, so there is a huge improvement in fractional bandwidth. Band 4 is also like, instead of from 5% to 40% is the improvement in fractional bandwidth. In L band, it is from 2% to 32%. So the noise in radio astronomy, you would have studied that noise is like root of bandwidth into tau, inversely proportional to square root of bandwidth into tau. So larger the bandwidth, your noise goes down, right? So therefore, this increase in bandwidth is straight away, it brings the noise down by a factor of few for the same integration time. And you might have heard about the UV coverage. UV is actually the instantaneous measurement between any two antenna pair. That's actually related to the antenna separation as well as which wavelength it is measuring. Since we have a large bandwidth at a given time across the band, you have much larger measurement compared to a narrow band. So suppose the bandwidth is 30 megahertz and you will have some limited measurement. Instead of 30 megahertz, you have 300 megahertz bandwidth, you have 10 times more measurements across the band. So that is why the left side is the old the legacy GMRT, which is before upgrade. Same integration time, same frequency band, and everything is similar, but just because of the bandwidth upgrade, the UV coverage is full. Means your antenna measurement is improved much more than that. So you are sensitive to much more signal for the same amount of integration time just because of the bandwidth upgrade. After the upgrade of GMRT, how does it compare with the rest of the facility in the world? So this is the expected sensitivity of upgraded GMRT compared to other major facilities in the world, like VLA and then Meerkat, ASCAP and SK1 and LOFAR. So you can see that blue and magenta are the UGMRT. So there is a substantial improvement, and this in many times the GMRT becomes comparable or better than other major telescopes. So I will probably show this in a different plot, another kind of plot in the next slide. That is the UGMRT versus SKA, JVLA, LOFAR. These are the major telescopes which are operational right now. So as you can see in magenta color is UGMRT. The left side, the orange red is LOFAR and right side is JVLA. So this is between 100 megahertz to 10 gigahertz. So as you can see, something like between about 1 gigahertz to a few gigahertz, there is a gap. And that gap is currently filled by UGMRT. So in all three plots, you can actually note this very clearly. Even the bottom right plot also you can see UGMRT is actually fills a gap between very low frequency telescope and high frequency telescope. Low frequency telescope is LOFAR, high frequency telescope is JVLA, and in between there is a gap which is neatly filled by UGMRT with equal matching sensitivity and resolution. And only SK1 will do better than UGMRT at GMRT frequencies, and SK1 is not yet ready. It will take several years to come. So until SK1 becomes operational in several years from now, UGMRT is the only telescope which is very powerful and very sensitive and high resolution in about like few hundred megahertz frequency range. So same thing is presented in another slide, like SKA. This is a square kilometer fact sheet document by SKA. LOFAR, UGMRT and JVL are the existing telescopes. SK1 and SK Goal are the future telescopes that is not yet operational. So as you can see, again, repeatedly, I'm telling you that between JVL and LOFAR, UGMRT nicely fills with matching sensitivity and resolution. So this is basic about GMRTs. Now I will mention about what kind of science which are done with the GMRT. So some of it you would have, some of this you would have actually heard in the individual science talks. Neutral hydrogen and cosmology, they are a bit interconnected. You would have heard about this 21 centimeter line, that hyperfine transition. That is a messenger from the early universe. So that is one of the major topics in for GMRT and radio astronomy, to measure the neutral hydrogen content in the universe, and that has a direct relation to cosmology. So observational cosmology is mainly about observing neutral hydrogen, predicting and observing neutral hydrogen. And then another standard research area is radio galaxies, quasars, and microquasars. So radio galaxy quasars are, I think, Psyche is going to cover in the next talk about AGNs, active galaxies. So they are like galaxies and which emit very bright signal at radio wavelength. So there, that is one major research area using GMRT. Pulsars, I think several new pulsars have been discovered with GMRT, and pulsars like timing, then glitches, and many properties of pulsar. So studying pulsar is a very key area using GMRT. Also, sun and planets. People observe sun at radio wavelength and make many conclusions about active sun, active phase, and quiescent phase. And you might have, you can probably Google for the news about coronal reheating in sun, but this was not done with GMRT, but done with MWA. In principle, that kind of science also can be done with GMRT. Planets, we have observed planets like Jupiter and Venus with the GMRT. So that has its own science interest. Like we observed Jupiter at GMRT, and to study the relation of Jupiter's radio emission with its X-ray emission. And other than planets, we also do extrasolar planets with the GMRT. So extrasolar planets are becoming very interesting nowadays because of the possibility of life outside the solar system. So if you actually take, how it goes is that if you actually extrapolate the properties of solar system planets like Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, and Earth, and Neptune, and then extrapolate saying that statistically the planets in other stellar system also will emit radio signals similar, and then you can actually make a prediction. Depends on how big the planet is and where is it close to the star. Is like a Jupiter kind of big planet sitting like a Venus or Mercury kind of distances. So there are many systems like this. At the distance of Mercury and Venus, there are massive planets like Jupiter or bigger than Jupiter. They are called hot Jupiters. So there have been like thousands of extrasolar planets known, out of which hundreds of massive planets close to the stars are known. And theory predicted saying that these extrasolar planets should emit strong radio signal at low frequencies. So some of them are observed at GMRT. Very interestingly, that many extrasolar planets where we expected a signal, strong signal, none of them were detected. So it actually a very interesting result. So this kind of negative result where you predict 100 millionsky and you don't see anything, and that's a very interesting result, and that actually paved way to remodel the planet. So it's an interesting result. So what I'm going to say is that observing extrasolar planets with at radio frequencies and at GMRT is a very interesting and niche topic which is happening. Then people also observe our galaxy, Milky Way, and nearby galaxies. Shubhashish has done some good work on this, and like Andromeda, or even slightly far away galaxies like many NGC and UGC galaxies, to study the radio infrared correlation and many other properties. And clusters of galaxies, as Ruta might have given a talk yesterday. And other than studying the individual galaxies, there are also low frequency surveys. So that is because suppose you always go behind known objects, then you actually miss the unknowns. So one of the important thing in research is that you always don't don't go behind known objects. You should keep an eye for unknown objects. How do you find unknown objects? Unknown objects, you have to do a blind survey. Means you just go to one piece of sky, and without any bias, you make a deep image of the sky. Then you actually see many new things. Suppose you image only known galaxies, then you will actually get to know only known galaxies. So low frequency surveys are aimed at completely like imaging the all sky in a very unbiased manner. So that it helps you to find new objects. So among the results, I will show one result which is probably which is my own result about the very deep image, just to give a feel for the sensitivity of GMRT. So this is like a very deep image at 300 to 500 megahertz wideband image at a very high resolution, 14 microGensky per beam. So at this kind of sensitivity, in 1 square degree, you see about 1800 or 2000 sources per square degree. So it's very crowded. The whole sky is like 40,000 square degree. Just imagine if it's like 2000 sources per square degree, and in the whole sky 40,000 degrees, how many sources you will find. So you actually, even is kind of one or two images, you find many thousands of radio sources, and that is very difficult. Means it is already too much in your plate to study. So as the telescope sensitivity improves, you go much deeper in the sky. You go behind many faint sources. You go, you understand, or you get to know so large number of sources in a small area. So that is, so you will come to know many new class of objects, or even further objects, or many things like that. So as sensitivity improves, we get to know much more in time. So other than the science thing, there is one interesting aspect which GMRT became famous. Is that you might have heard about this ExoMars Schiaparelli by ESO, European. So when that was about to crash on Mars, they contacted GMRT because GMRT had the right frequency at 430 megahertz to monitor it, and just a few antennas, GMRT monitored this lander until it crashed on Space Mars. This became a big news, and this also brought GMRT in the limelight in across the world. So this is just a fringe benefit of GMRT. Yeah. Now coming to the SKA which I mentioned. So SKA is a big telescope. Conceptually something like GMRT means several thousands of single dishes put in a few kilometers area, few thousands of kilometer area. Total collecting area will be 1 million square meters, like 1 square kilometer. So that's why it's called square kilometer array. The first phase expected 2020, but this is a bit old slide. It may become 2022 or a few years down the line. And there are about a dozen countries across the world which are part of SKA. India is also a very key member, and India with NCR as a nodal institute is handling telescope manager. Telescope manager is the brain and nerve of the array, and that is led by NCRA in collaboration with many other industries. And that is the reason why upgraded GMRT is a SKA Pathfinder. There are a few other major telescopes which are coming up in India. So other than SKA and GMRT, so that is, you might have heard about this SALT, South African telescope, and then INO, India-based Neutron Observatory, LIGO India, TMT. Why I am showing is that other than along with the major progress in the radio astronomy, there are also progress happening in other wavelengths like optical and LIGO and many other observatories. So astronomy as a whole is becoming global in India. So if you are interested, suppose you are interested in the gravitational waves or even big optical facilities, and that is also in India is also part of such facilities. So I am now coming to my last slide about how to join NCRA and other institutes. Like with MSc, you can, or BE taken any degree, you can come through standard entrance tests, and JEST is another one, and then TIFR entrance exam like GS 2020 or 2021. So there are many other many such schemes like JEST and INAT, GS, and some multiple schemes and VSRP. So there are multiple schemes how you can join NCRA, and this applies to IUCA and other institutes also, IUCA and RRI and etc. So there are other institutes where you can, if you are interested in astronomy, you can do IISc, IIA Bangalore, RRI, IUCA, then TIFR Bombay, PRL, and other places. So this I started with GMRT and told you that for astronomy you have many other places to do, and many places they also do radio astronomy. So it is not that if you want to do radio astronomy you have to join NCRA only. It's not like that. You can join any institute in anywhere in India or anywhere in the world and then become a user of GMRT. So I think I'm done with this. Yeah. Thank you.
It was a wonderful talk, sir. And you mentioned somewhere the GMRT is planning in implementing the 30 to 80 megahertz bandwidth antenna feed, right? But I mean, are the dimensions of the GMRT feed point sufficient to accommodate a 30 to 80 megahertz antenna? Like it will be 2-3 meters long. So, I mean,
no, that you meant that at focal point can that feed sit in, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So that has been actually we have tested it.
Okay.
It is sitting. See that is a 5th frequency band. Right. And GMRT quadrupole, you can do only 4 directions at 90 degrees separated.
Yeah.
So this will go along with some other frequency. Maybe I don't remember whether it is L band or 610 megahertz speed, but it is physically it is possible.
Okay.
And that has been tested a few times. A few prototype has been tested. The only reason why people are going slow is that the noise is very large. The sky noise is very large. RFI is very bad.
Okay.
So that is why people are going a bit slow. So otherwise, in terms of installation, there is no problem.
Sir, can you please elaborate on visiting students research program at TIFR?
At NCRA, right?
Yes, yes, sir.
So VSRP is one of the main purpose of VSRP is pre-selection. So therefore, it is VSRP's eligibility is like pre-final year is the eligibility. So if you are doing engineering degree, then you are in when you are in 3rd year. If you are doing master's degree, you are in the 1st year of MSc. So that time you apply for this program, and unfortunately for one VSRP where we can take about 8 to 10, there are like many hundreds, thousands of applications coming. So nowadays, so shortlisting becomes very difficult. But based on recommendation and many other parameters, people are shortlisted. So that scheme where you come, it's supposed to be in summer, anywhere between May to July. So for 2 months, the VSRP students comes to NCRA. They do a project with one of the NCRA faculties. Then at the end of the program, they give a seminar and also they give an interview. And if they do very well, then they are offered pre-selection for PhD research scholar.
Okay, sir. So I'll be completing my 6th semester like in the May of 2021. So would I be able to apply to the program?
6th semester you completed 3rd year, right?
Yeah, I'll be completing 3rd year in the May.
Then because then you are in a pre-final year, you are finishing pre-final year, you will be able to apply.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
But keep in mind saying that the competition is 1:100 kind of competition. 1:80 or some large number like this. So at some stage it becomes luck actually.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
It's easy to shortlist from 500 to 50, but very difficult to shortlist from 50 to 10.
Sir, can you once more clear on why there is a dense population of GMRT dishes in the central region?
Okay. So that is, I think I might not have explained in detail. See, the resolution is lambda by D, and depends on did you study UV coverage or what you meant by UV coverage? Sampling of UV planes or kind of thing? No, right?
Technicalities I haven't.
Okay. So basically, see, any 2 antenna pair does one measurement of the sky, right? So now, if you want, and then because it is closely spaced, lambda by D, if D is small, like less than a kilometer, the resolution is low, poor resolution.
Right.
If the antenna separation is like 25-30 kilometer, it is high resolution. If the antenna separation is like few hundred meter, it's a low resolution. And if you have an extended object in the sky, like very halo, like Ruta showed yesterday, or suppose there is a galaxy which is like half a degree of size, big size in angular size, then you need low resolution. And you need not just one baseline, you need hundreds of baseline at low resolution to completely image the object. So to get hundreds of baselines at low resolution, you kept about 15 dishes at within a kilometer. So that dense combination is center square. If you observe the source for 10 hours, it actually measures all permutation combinations of that alignment, like from rise to set. As Earth rotates, the same antenna pair, the orientation changes. So therefore, one pair is essentially like hundreds of measurements. So when you have hundreds of baselines and hundreds of measurements over 10 hours, we call it as a filled UV plane. Means you actually measure as many combinations of alignments, orientations as possible without much gap in between.
Okay.
So that is needed to image a diffuse emission, like a large scale angular emission.
All right. So this can be done by working out all the dishes in different interferometric modes, or is that kind of method carried out?
Different interferometry. No, interferometry mode, there are no different mode as such.
Okay.
You can.
I mean, do you divide the antennas? These 10 antennas will be form of one interferometer, and the other 10.
It is actually in
the direction and beam forming.
No. All antennas are when you do measurement, n into n minus 1 by 2 pairs are formed.
Okay.
By default.
All right.
So this is you don't need to do any extra work. It is just by design it will form automatically all these baselines.
Oh, okay.
Antennas are fixed, right? You don't change the location of the antenna.
Right.
Whereas VLA does
it. Changes the location of the antennas, right?
Yeah, sorry.
The very large array has the mechanism to change the location, right?
Correct. They can do it. They put the antennas on the rail. So when they want high resolution, they move the antenna to large distance.
Right.
And when they want low resolution, they put all antennas within 1 kilometer. Many of you, I think you should read EHT, Event Horizon Telescope, if you are interested. That's a very nice concept of using interferometry for high resolution. They work for 10 years on it.
Yeah, I just have one more question. So yes. Some of the bands which GMRT uses has bandwidths like 250 or 500 megahertz, right? So means the matching of the impedance or such long large bandwidths, is it feasible, or you introduce some balance or some matching mechanism in that feeds?
No, that engineering detail I don't know, but what I understand is that factor of 2 is all right. That's called octave bandwidth.
Okay.
Factor of 2 is possible without much difficulty, but as you said, there are filters to for the edges, right? There are several order filters, like third order, fifth order filters to nicely shape the corners. That is on top of the feed.
Okay. Prabhanjan, do you want to know how the antennas are connected to the ports, or is that your question?
Yeah.
Okay, so how the antenna is connected to the receiver, he is asking.
Okay, that is through fiber optics. From the antenna feed, the signal is brought down, and then through fiber optics, it is connected to the central electronics building. There is a converter which converts RF signal to optical fiber signal, and then converts back optical fiber signal to RF signal at the receiver central electronics building.
So there must be some kind of electronics right at the feed point as well, right, to amplify the signals.
Yeah, for the upgraded feed, there is no processing done at the feed. The raw signal as received by the feed is converted to optical signal and then transmitted through optical fiber to the central electronics building. Then again converted back to RF signal. Then that RF signal goes to baseband processing, and then baseband it becomes 0 megahertz to 400 megahertz, and then goes to correlator.
Okay.
Like some very small version of heterodyne receiver.